Speak bold, ain't tripping on the haters. It could take freedom from a cold dead hands. We're locked and loaded for the last dance. 'Cause we're the new American gangsters, ready to die for this land.
Hello, America. How are you today? How are you
Oh,
doing, Brian?
I'm doing pretty damn good. How are you doing?
Doing all right.
I'm glad to hear it. By God, you have a good weekend.
We did. We
Yeah.
went camping.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
That sounds like fun.
It's always nice getting out in nature and,
Oh, yeah. I
away
love it.
from the hustle and the grind, right?
Get away from the hustle and the grind. You got to, that's why I always like to go out because, I think that going out, you get more in touch with, what one might define as God, right?
Right.
You are in nature. You're with your thoughts. You're with yourself. You can reflect. You can digest.
Right.
That's my beautiful wife was telling me about some guy she was watching, I guess on Twitter, and he was saying that you got to get out every few days. What was it, honey? So that you can sort of absorb the big picture, so that you can take everything you have read and consumed and sort of incorporate it all into one. And that's,
There's something
good.
about seeing creation, and I don't
Yeah.
mean like the buildings and the
Right.
skyscrapers, man's creation,
Right.
but actual creation.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just special, and it
Yeah.
helps clear your thoughts and recenter you on what matters, what really matters.
Right.
There's
I
so
agree
much
100%.
garbage in,
Yeah.
right?
100%.
There's so many things going on in the world, and it can be very overwhelming.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
think sometimes it's good just to center yourself, like Teresa was
Right.
saying, and just really
Uh-huh.
be able to digest it and figure out what
Right.
parts of it
Right.
you want to
Yeah.
focus on.
Well, and that's interesting because I saw, Elon Musk tweeted something about he's going to, pay like $25 million or something like that to someone who comes up with something that can capture carbon and release, oxygen or whatever, and there was a pretty interesting response. It said, "Wow, this should be pretty easy."
It's a tree.
Elon, it's called a tree,
Yeah,
right? It's
right.
called a tree. It already exists. It's there for a purpose. And that is one of its fundamental purposes, right?
Right.
I mean that and to look beautiful,
Right.
and so interesting. But
Yeah, very
well, I'm
interesting.
glad you had fun. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But now we're back at it.
Yeah.
Right.
So what are we doing tonight?
Well, I think we'll start off by talking about chain of custody issues. I've talked to people in other states that are involved in the election integrity movement, and I think this is something that across the board people have concerns about.
Mm-hmm.
I talked to some people in a few counties in Texas.
Right.
One of the things they do is they only have single signatures on their chain of custody documents.
Uh-huh.
So they were asking, well, what does Arizona do? I said, well, it has to be signed by two people, right? For that validation if only one person's signing, but they don't do that
If
all
they
the time.
decide to do chain
Right.
of custody,
Right.
And so, the problem with chain of custody, from my point of view, is that it allows for multiple issues of voter fraud on down the chain, right?
Absolutely.
Especially as we look at Arizona, because if you don't know how many ballots you got and where they came from, then you have serious issues and serious questions. Where did they come from?
Well, origin, right?
Right.
And that's the biggest issue that we struggle with when it comes to chain of custody.
Right.
Because even if fraudulent ballots or other things were placed into the system, so let's say a whole batch of ballot affidavit envelopes were put into the system and there was proper chain of custody,
Right.
if it was identified that they were fraudulent, we would know its origin point.
Right.
How did they get there? And we'd be able to repair the system, right?
Right.
Did they come in through the USPS, through the mailbox? Did they come in through a polling center?
Right.
And knowing the origin of just about everything is super important, right?
Incredibly important. But, and so going back to 2020, and a lot of people just sort of want to wash 2020 away and forget about it. But if you forget about history, what happens?
You repeat.
You repeat it,
Right.
right? If we forget about what happened in 2020 and people are not held accountable, then it becomes much easier to replicate what happened in 2020 in the future. And so I don't know if you have any objections, but I want to just briefly, really quick talk about, sort of chain of custody in Maricopa County for the 2020 election, because um, following, was it after the audit or during the audit? I don't recall when it was. I believe it was after the audit. Heather Honey, Heather
Right.
Honey,
Verity vote. Right.
phenomenal expert. She knows Arizona election law far better than Maricopa County's own attorneys do, as she made very clear while she was on the stand, and she just blasted Joseph LaRue with his statement of the law and completely corrected him, which basically ended his entire line of questioning.
Right.
But she had requested all of Maricopa County's chain of custody records for the 2020 election. And, oh gosh, did I forget the yeah. And so, it's my coffee brewing. And so on behalf of Heather Honey and Verity Vote, I went down to Maricopa County. I met with Ray Valenzuela, and he handed me a binder, and he claimed that this binder was all of Maricopa County's chain of custody records for the 2020 election. So
Right.
I had taken my camera, my tripod, and I photographed every single page
Yeah.
within that
I
binder.
remember this.
Right.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Transferred them over to Verity Vote, and then I like that. That's kind of like CGI from the side with my coffee cup while my hands are doing something totally different. I know, right? Right. It's kind of wild. And so they analyzed the documents, and Heather called me back and said, "Hey, they didn't give us everything." And so we said, "Hey, okay, you didn't give us everything. We want the rest of these records." And Maricopa County had withheld, what was it, I think 2 or 3 pages of chain of custody documents following the 2020 election, right? And this is one of them, right? This document I'm looking at, you probably can't read it very good, and we don't actually have it as an exhibit tonight, but we've used it multiple times. It's dated November 4th, 2020.
And if people, real quick,
Right.
go to our website under election fraud.
Uh-huh.
There's a link on We the People, AZ Alliance.
Mhm.
And if you go to the website, go to election fraud, the Verity Vote chain of custody report is actually published on our website.
Yeah. And I'm giving a shout out here to Verity Vote because I'm actually cribbing Heather Honey's report when I'm showing this. But this is one of the chain of custody documents that Maricopa County intentionally failed to produce to us in its initial disclosure. Once we requested it, it got hung up in the county attorney's
Of
office
course it
for a
did.
very long
Yes.
time. And my guess is, well, they decided on, what to do about it. But this shows that on November 4th of 2020, 18,000 ballots were received at Runback from
And just for
Maricopa
clarity,
County.
for those of you watching, Election Day was November 3rd, which
Yes.
means that these ballots, according to their chain of custody documentation,
Mhm.
was not provided for final counts
Right.
until after the election.
Right. So these were 18,000 ballots accepted after the election. And that would have been after much of the counting had been done, right? So they had a pretty good idea as to who was winning and what what margin they needed,
Right. That's
right,
correct.
to A, ensure a win, and B, avoid a recount, things of that nature, right?
Right.
And so, we demanded that they print out this document and give it to us. And and when they did, we made it public, right?
Right.
And then, do you remember what the county had to say? You recall that?
Well, I think we have the county's official statement here.
Let's see. Let's look
Do
at
we want
it.
to put that up?
Let's look at number 13, Steve, the Gilbertson statement.
And while he's pulling that up, um, this also led us
Mhm.
to want the loading dock footage to
Right.
find out, oh, I don't know, the ever important
Uh-huh.
origin of the
Right.
ballots that were
Right.
received at Runback.
Right.
How did they get there?
Right.
Right. And we, yes,
Yeah.
yes. And we did file a lawsuit. We
Mhm.
ultimately lost. The courts, the county tried to make it appear that
Right.
Runback was nothing more than a mere vendor like Staples or any
Right.
other vendor,
Right.
and really discount the fact that Runback is
Uh-huh.
responsible for over 90% of our elections.
Right.
But that's what prompted the request for this video.
Yes, that's correct. And we have tried multiple ways to get this video, which is why we've requested that the Department of Justice or the National Security Agency, because CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, is part of the National Security Agency that was embedded inside of Runback, we believe, and
Right.
had access to their systems through the Center for Internet Security's Albert sensors, right?
Right.
And so we think the DOJ and the NSA need to ensure that they freeze. The video's probably already gone because nobody wants to see it. We're going to talk about why, but are we ready with that article yet, Steve?
Yeah, just waiting for you guys.
Yeah,
Okay,
go ahead
pull
with
her
that
up.
article.
And so Megan Gilbertson, she's the communication, or was, I'm not sure if she still is or not, the communications director for Maricopa County Elections Department. This is basically what she said. She said that the department processed ballots by scanning them into the tabulation machines at MCED, the Maricopa County Elections Department, before transferring their custody the next day to Runbeck Election Services, which verifies the legitimacy with signature verification, right? And so, the, what
Hmm.
the county came out and said initially,
We counted them without signature verifying
right,
them,
that they
which
violated.
that's
Right,
what they just said.
right. That's at least on this chain of custody document here. That's 18,000
Right.
plus violations of law,
Absolutely.
right? And so
But didn't they force her to retract that
they
statement
forced her to
later?
retract that statement, and they came out with another statement that said, "Oh yeah, we picked them up from the post office and we just had them in a truck at the elections department and we delivered
Right.
them the next day."
And for the people's awareness on that, they did this again in 2024. A lot of people may not realize that in 2024, the day after election day, Runbeck actually contacted the party, the Republican Party,
Uh-huh.
to say that they were receiving a new batch of ballots the day after the election that were racked and misplaced in MTech
Right.
in the tabulation center, and they
Mhm.
forgot to load
Right.
them on the truck.
Right.
So it's just kind of interesting how this pattern continues to
Right.
repeat itself. But go
Yeah.
ahead, Brian.
Well, and it's interesting that the huge problem with their statement that these ballots were just sitting in a truck at Maricopa County completely is blown apart by Maricopa County's own procedures and policies with respect
Right.
to ballots received in the mail. And so basically, Maricopa County's entire process entails two people driving a truck to the postal service. Everything was consolidated into I believe, the Van Buren postal branch,
Hmm.
right? And so they would take a truck every day or twice a day or whatever. They would drive it to the postal service on their way to Runbeck with a delivery, and they would pick up whatever the postal service had received, and then they would go to. By the way, they would then throw away the weight receipts that the postal service gave to it to know the exact weight of the mail
Right.
that
Because
they were
weight would do
receiving.
what? It
Right.
would give us a pretty close estimate on how
Be
many
a-
ballots were there.
right.
So
Pretty-
they wouldn't want us to have those
Right.
if, in fact, they wanted to put extra ballots.
And they, in fact, continued to throw them away until Alex Colladin, Representative Colladin, demanded that they preserve them for the 2024 election, right? And so they would legitimately throw away these chain of custody documents, which I believe to be a violation of federal law. They're supposed to preserve all,
Election-related records.
election-related records if
Yes,
it's a federal
absolutely.
election, right?
Absolutely.
And so the big problem, they have is that the truck would then go to Runbeck directly from the Postal Service. That was their process.
Right, but couldn't they just claim then that they were dropped at a poll center that day and didn't come in the mail? Would that be a claim they
claimed
could use?
Well, they claimed they were all mail ballots, ballots received by mail.
Interesting.
And so that's another part of the problem with having a U.S. Postal Service, which is very politically oriented, right?
Mhm.
It's governed by two labor unions, and they're both very pro-Democrat. In fact, they endorsed the entire slate of Democrat candidates in the 2020, 2022, and 2024 elections. And so you have partisans then delivering these ballots. You have partisans returning the ballots, and you have partisans doing whatever else with the
And
ballots.
no tracking at the
Right.
post office side.
Zero tracking.
And I've brought this
Yeah.
up a few times, but I don't think it can be said enough. Many of us subscribe to the USPS, like kind of what's in your mailbox. I forget exactly what they call it, but it's a program where they scan the mail that's going to your home
Mm-hmm.
in advance so that you can see an image of the envelope kind of the morning before, the night before it actually is scheduled to arrive, so
Right.
you know what to expect in your mailbox.
Right.
They've been running this program for years and years. I would
Mhm.
say at least 20 years. But conveniently, the ballot affidavit envelopes are not part of that process. They
Oh, of course
don't,
not.
the post office does not scan
Right.
the ballot affidavit envelopes.
Right.
They will scan junk mail that you receive
Mm-hmm.
from, a couch company,
Right.
but your ballot affidavit envelope, they
Mhm.
don't scan that, right,
Right.
Brian?
There are no controls whatsoever on this. And so Maricopa County was caught, sort of with their pants down. And then the first statement they came out with was, yeah, we violated the law, 18,000 plus times. And they didn't want anybody to know about that, which is why they initially hid those chain of custody documents from Verity Vote when Verity Vote had
Oh,
originally
you mean they
requested
didn't
them.
just somehow accidentally
Misplace them.
misplace them?
Oh, you mean like they did during the Lake v. Hobbs trial, the 2022?
Right, exactly. I mean, they're really
exactly.
good at
Right.
misplacing documents.
Right.
They want everybody to know how
Right.
competent they are,
Right.
but
And-
they conveniently misplace
Yeah.
things all the time.
Yeah, and so we were arguing. I can't remember what it was, 30-some thousand ballots that had no legitimate chain of custody during the Lake v. Hobbs trial, based on the records we had. And actually, about 6 months after the trial, they finally gave up the chain of custody documents. They found them, in a drawer somewhere, and they actually showed Verity Vote did an analysis, and it's some 80,000 ballots had no chain of custody. Right.
Right.
There was this huge difference. And Stephen Richer even admitted that they couldn't, he couldn't reconcile the number of ballots that the Secretary of State was posting. And who was the Secretary of State in 2022?
Well, that would have been Katie Hobbs.
Katie Hobbs. And we know Katie Hobbs, her campaign was working directly with States United and Maricopa County Recorder, don't we?
Absolutely.
Right. And as they were doing monthly briefings for the elections department and basically, I believe, violating Arizona law by allowing for this private entity to make these in-kind contributions to Maricopa County's election, right? Or they did it statewide, actually.
Well,
Yeah.
you talk about this chain of custody thing, and we're looking at least 18,000 in 2020, at least, right? We could argue there was probably more. And then Verity Vote analyzed 2022, and we're
Mhm.
looking at 83,000.
Right.
I think it was the Perkins Coie attorney when we were doing the Kerry Lake trial that said, but even if, what do they want us to believe? That hundreds of thousands of ballots come out of nowhere and get inserted into the system? Who cares?
Right.
Even if they do, it doesn't matter. Chain of custody doesn't matter because we have signature verification, right, Brian?
Yeah, and that's, signature verification is a whole nother problem in itself. I mean, We the People did an analysis for the state legislature, didn't they, of
For
signatures
the
in
Arizona
2020?
Senate, it was
Yeah.
the 2020,
Uh-huh.
and there was just incredible violations of law.
Right.
Lots of things wrong. They were accepting ballots without signatures. They were
Mhm.
accepting um, altered affidavits. So they were
Right.
actually altering the ballot affidavit
Right.
envelopes in order to count and accept those
Mhm.
ballots. There were probably 20% that somehow violated one statute or another, whether
Mhm.
it was the signature didn't match and it didn't go into curing
Right.
whatsoever, or they were curing ballots with no signature, which
Right.
is a direct violation of law. Is an affidavit lawful, Brian, if it's not signed?
No.
So how
Yeah.
would, even if the law allowed it, it
Mhm.
states on there it's an affidavit, but
Right.
Arizona law is very clear.
Right.
An unsigned ballot cannot be counted.
That's 100%
And
correct.
there were thousands of ballots without a signature that were
Right.
counted in the
Right.
2020 election.
Mhm.
So these are unexecuted
Right.
affidavits.
No, I mean, we were in an era of, we've got to stop the Russia, disinformation. The commies are trying to take over America, and we've got to destroy, Trump, and we've got to destroy MAGA, who are just a bunch of Russian disinformation commies, right? And
Right.
that's sort of the theme of the day, and that's how they converted so many people to be willing to do what needed to be done to ensure that Donald Trump didn't win again in 2020. Truth be told, I'm glad he didn't win in 2020, because then the American people got to see, very plainly, what their intent was and what their plans were, and how they intended to govern. And so,
Oh, I agree
yeah,
100%. I think
yeah,
it had to happen. I think it was
hmm
vital for
right,
America and for our system of government
right,
to see what happened. I think it woke a lot of people
uh-huh,
up, helped them to understand
hmm
what was happening, not only
right,
in their elections, but
hmm
what was happening because of the weaponized government and the
right,
far left radical
right,
sect that's trying to
right,
overtake our government. And I
right,
don't think any of that would have been seen
yeah.
had he have won in
Yeah.
2020.
And so we have, sort of digressing just a little bit, we have, a complete lack of chain of custody. And so Arizona law, what does it say with respect to chain of custody? What's the county recorder supposed to do?
Maintain clear and concise chain of custody at all times.
Which includes what? Count, right?
Right. It includes
They've
actual
got they've
counts.
got to know how many ballots they're maintaining custody of, right?
Now they've wiggled around this over the years.
Mhm.
Until a recent law change, they weren't
Mhm.
required to ever count um, late, early mail-in ballots. So
Mhm.
So if people dropped them off at the poll center,
Well,
they
no,
were
that's
required to do a physical count based on how they wormed around it, right? Because they
right.
tried to claim
Uh-huh.
we don't have to do it at site. Nothing says we have to do it at site.
Correct.
So what they would do is they would seal them and
Mhm.
they would take them to the tabulating center
Right.
where they then claimed that they took physical counts of the ballots.
Right.
Now we've come to learn that that's absolutely untrue. So even if that
100%.
was allowed,
Right.
which I think we would both
Mhm.
argue that was never a concession
Right.
in law. That was them using a gray area
Yeah.
to create law.
Well, the whole thing was that the EPM makes it very clear, and I think Arizona revised statutes also make that clear, that I don't have the statute handy in front of me, but basically what it said, what it allowed for was, you can either count them at the poll center, those ballots that are dropped off and they put in the drop boxes, right? You can either count them at the poll center, and it very clearly uses the term count. Or if you don't count them at the poll center, you put them in secure bins. You
Mhm.
seal those bins.
Secure, sealed
Secured,
bins.
sealed bins, so nothing can be added or removed from those bins once they're closed and sealed. But when you open them at the central tabulation facility, which would be, as Megan Gilbertson said, MCED, that you have to count them. The law very
Right.
clearly said when they're opened at MCTech or MCED, whatever you want to call it, they have to be counted. Now, what we learned during the Lake v. Hobbs trial is Maricopa County wasn't counting them, were they? Steve, can you pull up number 20? I'm sorry, number 14. 20.
I was like, whoa, where'd we get 20, Brian?
Whoa, I don't know. Just
So,
threw a whole
no,
bunch of
Which
stuff.
they
number?
weren't counting them.
14.
That's the last
14.
one I said. Yeah,
Yeah.
14. If we, what is counting, right? I mean, that's the
Yeah.
question. And
Uh-huh.
that's what we want 14 for, because we found out they weren't actually
Right.
physically counting
Mhm.
anything at all. And while he's pulling that up, we also found in 2022, we
Here it is.
learned that they weren't even counting the ballots that were going into the tabulators
Right.
to reconcile them either. Okay,
Yeah,
go
and,
ahead, Brian.
and so count, very clear, to indicate or name by units or groups so as to find the total number of units, right? The total number of units. So if they were actually counting them at MC Tech, they would have a total number that were received from polling places, and they would be able to annotate, because each polling place would use its own bin, right? And
Right.
so they would know it was from polling place number 1 or polling place number 100. They would be able to write all of these down on chain of
Go
custody
ahead and put
forms.
that back up if you would.
Yeah,
Please put
but
that up.
but what we learned during Lake v. Hobbs is that um, and we also learned this from Secretary Fontes when he substituted in on behalf of Katie Hobbs
Mhm.
at the appellate level,
Yes.
that that you couldn't actually tell how many they had because they're merely estimates,
Right. They
right?
were taking these bins.
Which was an admission that Maricopa County was violating Arizona law.
Well, so I'm going to give you their little answer
Uh-huh.
on that, right? Because
Right.
what they were doing, right,
Mhm.
Brian, is when these bins were being delivered,
Mhm.
they were opening the bins and they
Uh-huh.
were racking them. They were racking them into these sorter
Mhm.
bins to put them on a truck to send them to Runback.
Right.
So they were estimating how many ballots based on
Uh-huh.
so many ballots
Right.
essentially fit in a rack. That's
Right.
what they were claiming, right?
Right.
Could you be off 83,000 ballots even if you estimated? So
That's
let's just think about
pretty
that before we move on, right?
It's pretty tough to do because Stephen Richer and Adrian Fontes have gone out of their way to make us look like kooks and that we've got to trust the election professionals because they know what they're doing, right? They've done it for years. You've
Mhm.
been part of a lot of litigation where they have actually demonized us and tried to make us look like
Terrorists.
just a bunch of crazy terrorists,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And so the reason for doing that, of course, was to get courts to deny us public records requests because then people would go out and go crazy and people would get hurt. But the problem is they're all admitting that they weren't actually counting the ballots.
Well, here's the irony of it, though.
But how can you be that far off?
You can't. And they say you can't access any of the records that Runback has, right?
Uh-huh.
You can't access those
Right.
because they're just a contract.
Right.
But then when you question, well, why are you letting a contractor count the ballots when
Right.
the law clearly states you have to count the ballots?
Right.
They say, well, they're counted by the contractor
Mhm.
under supervision of
Right.
county employees.
Right.
So you have, according to them, 2
Mhm.
full-time county employees
Mhm.
in Runback
Mhm.
observing Runback doing the counting,
Right.
and therefore, by extension, they've fulfilled their statutory duties.
Right.
What do you think, Brian? Are you buying
Yeah,
it?
no, I don't buy that 100%. And that's the problem with our elections these days is the county has passed accountability off to private corporations like Runbeck and non-governmental organizations like the Center for Internet Security, right? And this has all been done as sort of part of this big move by the NSA through CISA to change the way our elections work, to deny us access to records so that we can't do what we do, which is hold government accountable, right?
Well, speaking of denying records and obscuring records,
Mm-hmm.
Maricopa County, well, the entire state of Arizona, has an interesting practice of taking those ballot affidavit envelopes
Oh, yeah.
and putting them into
Mm-hmm.
what they're calling the voter registration record,
Right,
right?
right.
And, one of the claims in my little 1 paragraph advertisement of this is
Mm-hmm.
what's going in your voter record And
Right.
are they actually doing this to put it in your record, or are they doing it to obscure public record? So, is it lawful,
Yeah.
Brian?
Well, personally, I don't think so. And we'll talk about some of the reasons why I don't believe it's lawful. I would say that this was part of an effort. And in my notes here, I got 16168F, and behind that, I wrote the word concealment, right?
Right.
Because 16168F. Can we pull up
That would be number 7.
number 7, Steve?
16168, Section F,
Yeah.
Arizona Revised Statute.
Right. And so this basically makes voter registration list precinct registers um, to be it limits the use of these records, right? And so Maricopa County, and was this process begun under Adrian Fontes when he became the recorder, or
It
did
was
it
when he
exist
was the
in
recorder at
advance?
Maricopa County, not
Yeah.
as Secretary of State,
Right.
but as recorder. Yes. Adrian Fontes was elected into
Yeah.
office, and I believe the changes in adaptation occurred
Mhm.
around, I don't remember if it was just before the 2018 or the
Mm-hmm.
2020 election, but it was very recent
Right.
that these
Right.
changes occurred.
Yeah, and so they basically limit who can have access to these records. You can get access for signature verifications on petitions and candidate filings, for election purposes, and for news gathering purposes, right? And so you don't have any of the mainstream media that's willing to take a long, hard look at what I've described in the past as voter identity theft. They simply won't do it. And having done that, having done a study of that magnitude, um, you you it's expensive, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
And
Very
it's
expensive.
it's a
Yes.
huge undertaking.
A massive undertaking. When we audited the 2020
Mhm.
ballot affidavit envelopes, not only did it cost thousands upon thousands of dollars,
Yeah.
it required a pool
Mhm.
of a few hundred well-trained
Right.
staff to
Yeah.
come in and do that, and
Yeah.
it was not an easy undertaking.
Right.
It's definitely nothing the media cares to do, especially because the media continues to propagate
Right.
that our elections are free, fair, and safe, right? There's
Right.
nothing wrong with our elections.
Yeah.
So it's, this is a way, once again,
Mhm.
for them to continue to prohibit the public from knowing what's happening in our
Right.
elections. And I really believe that.
Mhm.
Now, We the People has filed a lawsuit to obtain the 2022 ballot affidavit
have.
envelopes,
Yeah.
and that is currently under
Yeah.
litigation. So we're hoping that we win this. We feel confident
Mhm.
that we are in the right position,
Mhm.
that this is a public record. But what are they doing specifically, Brian, in order to try and deny people access to these ballot affidavit envelopes? What
Well-
is their rationale?
Well, if you go back to 168F, it says, yeah, you're not one of the you're not entitled to access these ballot affidavit envelopes because you're not one of the reasons given, even though they're specifically allowed to be reviewed for election related purposes, right? Kerry Lake, during the entire Lake v. Hobbs trial, and appellate issues there, was even denied access to them,
Right.
even though they were specifically for an election purposes, because an election challenge is an election purpose, right? And so,
But are we
um,
believing that these ballot affidavit envelopes are actually subject to 16168F?
no,
I mean,
I don't
are
think
these
so.
open public records?
I think they're open public records. And Steve, could we pull up? Let's see here, 16161, which is number 5. And so if you look at 16161A, what does it say? And there's a whole debate, isn't there, right now about, the legislature changed the word from form to record, right? Well, what is a
Right.
record? I mean, A says what the registration record is. It says when the registration form is filled out, signed by the elector, and received by the county recorder, it shall constitute an official public record. An
Of the
official, right?
registration, right?
It's an official public record, right? And so, for example, what does the Maricopa County recorder maintain?
Well, they maintain all kinds of records. How about
Right.
your property deed
They
when you
maintain your
purchase a
property,
home, right?
right? Right. And so, all of those records are maintained by Maricopa County recorder, and as a public record, right? That doesn't sort of change the nature really, just because it's no longer a form. It's basically scanned in, right? And it becomes what's known as a public record. So if you had based on the county's own logic, right? Adding signatures to a voter's public record, right? Based on that same logic, if you requested an email from Stephen Richer to Scott Jarrett on a specific date, and somebody, they would then be able to go in and make changes to that, wouldn't they?
Well, based
Or
on
would
their
they?
logic, but no. I
Right.
mean, a record is a record,
A public
right?
record's a public
What they're
record.
trying to claim is by changing it from maintain the voter registration form
Right.
or compare signatures
Right.
to, because that's what it comes down to.
Right.
They changed the word in signature verification to say
Uh-huh.
that it shall be compared with the signatures in the voter registration record
Right. But
versus form.
there can be multiple legitimate signatures in a registration record that don't entail the voter's ballot affidavit envelope,
Well,
correct?
exactly, right?
Right.
Because if I were to, let's just say I were
Uh-huh.
to send a letter saying that I want to be added or removed from the active early voting list,
Right. Right.
that would be a record,
Right.
right?
That's
That would be an
100%
additional
correct.
record that you would
Uh-huh.
maintain
Yeah.
because it would show why they're getting an early ballot or why they stopped getting an early ballot.
Right. And so, the law clearly says that these are, public records, right? They are a public record of a voter's registration. And so let's talk about the legislature, right? They have the power to allow the county recorder to change a public record, right? And that's where any laws with respect to updating a voter's registration record should come from. So let's take a look now at, for example, Steve, can you pull up 16136? I'm
Well, and I
sorry.
believe
Number 3.
I believe that these specific instances by which
Mm-hmm.
you can change or alter a
Right.
voter registration record are consistent
Right.
with the 1993 NAVRA Act
Mm-hmm.
and federal law.
Right.
Because we have to also
Uh-huh.
understand that these records must be maintained according to federal law,
Right.
not just state law. Right.
Okay.
And so they're consistent.
Yeah. And so if you change your party affiliation, right, you can't just willy nilly send the recorder an email and say, hey, make me a Democrat or make me a Republican. What do you have to do? According to Arizona Revised Statute 16136, you have to re-register,
Yes.
right? You have to re-register. And so the recorder can't just, change your party affiliation.
You mean I can't just call up somebody
Right.
in
No.
Recorder Heap's office and
Uh-uh.
say I want to change my party affiliation?
No, you've got to re-register. Yeah, and
Okay.
so let's look
So
at
you have to take what is that called? A non-passive action, right? You have to take
you have to take
uh,
some
a
active step.
positive active step
Right.
in order for the recorder to have the authority to alter your record.
Meaning you have to fill out a new voter registration form. And what do you do on a voter registration form? You sign it,
You
right?
sign it.
You sign it.
Absolutely.
And so when you sign that voter registration form, we're going to talk in a little bit about how how the recorder is allowed to, sort of amend your voter registration record. But that's something that's allowed specifically by the law. And so let's look at ARS 16135A, which is number 2, Steve. And so This one deals with a change of your registration address, right?
Right?
And so if you change your registration address, right? An elector, if we look at A, an elector who is correcting the residential address shown on the elector's voter registration record shall re-register with the new residential address or correct the voter registration record as prescribed by this section. Okay, so
Hmm.
A says, well, you just got to re-register, right? Again, thereby you would be putting your signature on a registration form. And but what is also the key? Going back to the other statute we talked about, 161. I'm sorry, 136, and now talking about 135. But when you re-register to vote, what do you have to show?
You have to show ID,
Identification, right?
right? Even in B, if you look at
Right,
B, that's another option, right?
right.
It says you can also, if you don't do it on time, so
Uh-huh.
let's say it's a week before the election,
Hmm.
you can go to a polling center and you can update the voter's new address,
Right.
right? The voter shall present, oh, what is that,
A
Brian?
form of
Identification.
identification that includes the voter's given name and surname and the voter's complete resident address that is located within the precinct for the voter's new residence address, right?
Right.
And so that's tantamount to filling out a registration form in that you've got the requirement of identification. And
It
so
also says the voter shall affirm
right,
in writing
right.
the new residential address. So again, we're having to make
Mhm.
a positive
An affirmative
action, an
statement.
affirmative
Right,
action
right.
in order to have it altered. So if you
Right.
want to change your political party, if you want
Uh-huh.
to change your address, you
Mhm.
have to um, take an affirmative action
Right. And both
showing ID,
right.
right? Or
Uh-huh.
filling out a new registration with a
Right.
new signature. One
Right.
of those actions in order for
Right.
that to happen, right?
Yeah. And so another way to do it, let's see here, um, is E. An elector may also correct the residence address on the elector's voter registration record by requesting the address change on a written request for an early ballot that is submitted pursuant to section 16542 and that contains all of the following. And what's number 4 down there say?
The elector's
The
signature.
elector's signature,
Notice number one
right?
is important though too.
Yeah,
It must contain a request to change your registration record.
right. And so what we're talking about here in all of these steps is an affirmative step taken by the voter to request the change to the voter's registration record and an additional signature that then can be added to the voter's registration record,
Right.
right? And all of these require some form of typically identification, right? And
Right.
so let's take a look, Steve, at this. What happens when somebody changes their name? And that would be number 4. What happens if you change your name,
So
right?
we know how to change our political
Yeah,
party. We
right.
know how to change our address. This is how we change our name.
Yeah, and so it says an elector and
Desiring.
an elector desiring to register under a new name resulting either from a court order of marriage shall re-register and shall state on the new affidavit of registration the elector's formal legal name. An elector may also correct the voter record by providing the name while voting a provisional ballot pursuant to 16584 at the appropriate polling place.
Which requires what?
Identification.
And provisional ballots also require a
Signatures.
signature.
Right.
So both
And so
identification and signature.
right. And so each of these ways provided for the legislature to update a voter's registration record, their public record of their registration to vote. And maybe that's how we should phrase it. Instead of saying a registration record, we should start saying their public record of registration to vote, because that's what it is, a public record. And
Absolutely.
and and so when we start thinking that the Maricopa County Recorder can willy-nilly update public records absent some legal authority to do so, then we give the county recorder a substantial amount of power to update whatever records he may see fit to update in any way he wants to update them. And that's pretty problematic, isn't it?
Well, absolutely. I don't think this would be an acceptable practice in
Mhm.
any other realm of life.
Right.
I don't think anybody would think it's acceptable that a county recorder could update a title to your home,
Right.
a deed to your home,
Right.
right? Or um, uh, any other kind of what power of attorney, things like that. Anything
Mhm.
that's officially filed, that's signed by somebody taking an action, they
Mhm.
don't have the authority to change or alter those records.
That's
They're filed
100%
as
correct.
is,
Yep.
right? They're filed as is,
Right.
exactly like they look. And
Yeah.
50 years from now, when you look at it, it's identical to what you
It
filed.
should be
Right.
identical. And if it's not identical, it's a problem. I mean, what happens? You got a mortgage and somebody goes in and modifies it to double the amount on your mortgage, right? Then you as a homeowner are in trouble. And so one of the recorder's primary functions is to maintain these documents in their original form, whether they're public records, which have to be maintained. There's a Public Records Act that specifies they've got to be maintained pursuant to, standards put forth by some museum and archival society and all of
Right.
this other stuff that we're not going to get into today. But they can't, they don't have the authority just to willy-nilly change public records absent some authority in law to do so. And so let's talk about, where does the Maricopa County Recorder get express legislative approval to modify a voter's public record of registration? And so let's look at number 6, Steve. ARS 16160. Arizona Revised Statute 16164. And so this one says, on receipt of a new registration form that affects a change of precinct, political party address, or name, the county recorder shall indicate electronically in the county voter registration database that the registration has been canceled and the date and reason for cancellation. This last paragraph, Shelby, is very important. It says the county recorder may modify the record of registration to reflect any changes of address, name, or party, or on receipt of a registration form reflecting such changes. Right.
Right.
This statute expressly allows the county recorder to make modifications to the voter's registration record or public record of registration, right?
And it even goes as far as to state that records of cancellation
Right.
must be maintained in those records, right?
That's correct.
So with this, the statute,
Mhm.
in your opinion, Brian,
Right.
is the statute ambiguous at all
That's
as to the authority?
That's not very ambiguous. And there is absolutely zero statutory authority for the Maricopa County Recorder to update otherwise a voter's public record of registration. Zero legislative authority. And so the big legal argument's taking place right now, and there's one case right now that scares me. It's the Arizona Free Enterprise Club, I think. Is it about Maricopa County or is it about with a state? I don't recall.
It's regarding the state, and the case was filed in Yavapai County because,
Mhm.
again, this practice is taking
Right.
place in all 15 counties.
Right.
So the case was filed by the Free Enterprise Club
Uh-huh.
in Yavapai. But the argument they're making is that the Secretary of State didn't give the authority, it doesn't have the right to give the authority to do this. But the EPM doesn't give the authority either, does it, Brian?
That is 100% correct. I'm over here.
Making coffee.
pot.
But the problem is statute doesn't allow for it.
It
And so
doesn't.
the argument is well, you
Yeah.
don't have the right as the Secretary of State to put things into law. You can't
Right.
legislate in the EPM. And we all
Right.
agree that's true.
Right.
But even the EPM does not give them the authority to do what it is they are doing.
That's correct. But it's my understanding, and what really scares me is that all of the parties are saying, "Oh yeah, the counties put these in there, right?" And
Right.
so they're all saying, "Oh, would they get the authority from the EPM to put these signatures in the voters' registration record," which is a 100% complete farce,
Right.
right? And
Because
so,
the EPM doesn't give
yeah.
the county authority to do it either.
Ooh, pardon me, Steve. Can we see number 11, please?
So, number 11, that is the Election Procedures Manual
Right.
issued by the Secretary of State in
Mhm.
2019.
Right.
And so, what Brian is having pulled up now is page
Mhm.
69 of the 2019 Elections Procedure Manual for the
And
Arizona Secretary of State.
and just really quickly, so people understand what we're talking about when we talk about the EPM. The election procedures manual, the state legislature is sort of deferred to the executive branches of government to create an elections procedures manual, right?
Right.
Because legislatures don't nitpick every little thing with
They
respect
don't
to
tell
an
you
election.
how to
Right,
comply with the law.
right.
They just
And
tell you
so
what it looks like to comply.
Right.
Right.
And so the Secretary of State, responsible for statewide elections and running the statewide election apparatus in the state of Arizona, draft election procedures manual, and it's submitted to the public for review. One of the issues, with the last EPM was Adrian Fontes. He didn't submit it to public review, for a long enough period of time as he's required by law. So, he got hit for that. But he also did all kinds of wacky stuff, like tried to censor speech in the new EPM.
Well, we've seen that they're
Right.
trying to use the EPM to
Mhm.
actually create legislation.
That's correct.
And the job of the
Right.
EPM and our legislators really need to work at
Right.
fixing this
Yeah.
because it's really bad that
Mhm.
they have given this authority. But all it's supposed to do is write the compliancy procedures, right?
Right.
So it's not supposed to issue law or
Right.
create new law. It's just supposed to simply say the legislature say this.
Right.
So this is how we
Uh-huh.
can achieve that goal.
Right. And
Right?
example of that is what we talked about earlier, right? The legislature said you must maintain chain of custody for every ballot. So they flush out the details of what is chain of custody, right?
Right.
Adrian Fontes, of course, removed all references to chain of custody because they don't
Yes,
want
he did.
anybody to know how many ballots they actually legitimately received, because that would make it impossible to tell, who actually won, because it denies you the ability to inject or remove ballots from the system. But
So
that's just one theory.
even if the free enterprise theories was correct
Mhm.
and the EPM unjustifiably gave the authority for this to happen, and let's just roll with that.
Right.
The EPM doesn't say that the mail-in ballots become part of the voter registration
No,
record, does
not
it?
at all.
Go ahead and pull that up, Steve. Number 11.
Yeah. And so we'll sort of break this down a little bit. And so if we go down to paragraph number 2 there, we go to the
Third sentence from the bottom,
yeah,
Brian.
third I'm having trouble.
Third line from the
Why don't
bottom.
you read it? I'm
Okay,
having
it
trouble
says,
finding it.
after verifying an in-person early ballot, a county recorder may update the signature in a voter record by scanning the voter's affidavit signature and uploading the signature envelope to the voter record, right?
Right.
So after
Well,
verifying in-person early ballot.
all right, and then let's go back up to the first sentence. All early ballots, including ballots by mail and those cast in person at an on-site early voting location, emergency voting center, or through a special election board, must be signature verified by the county recorder, right? So
Right.
what we're looking at here is this paragraph. Let's break this paragraph down.
Mhm.
What do you have to do as an in-person on-site early voter?
Well, you have to show an ID to
Oh,
receive that ballot because you don't
yeah.
already have a ballot affidavit envelope.
Right.
When you're
Right.
an in-person voter, you show up at the
Right.
poll, just like it's election day.
Right.
You show your ID, you check in at the e-poll book,
Uh-huh.
the ballot on demand printers
Uh-huh.
print you a ballot,
Yeah.
but they do something different
Mhm.
in early voting. they also print you a ballot affidavit envelope that you
Right.
sign to make it look like a mail-in ballot, but it is clearly distinct in that you show up in person
Right.
and show your ID to a worker who
You
does
show
what?
your ID.
Verifies your identity.
Right.
Right?
And so we talked about all of these statutes and the statutes that allow for the county recorder then to make changes to your public record of voter registration all require what?
In-person showing of ID
Some ID,
or a
right?
signature.
Right.
Right?
And so you either re-register to vote, which requires identification
Right,
and
because you have to
signature.
put let's
Mhm.
distinguish this. You're signing something that's not verifying your identity.
Right.
But a voter registration record requires you put personal
Uh-huh.
identifying information.
Right.
That's what makes it very distinct from a ballot affidavit envelope. If
Right.
I mail in a ballot affidavit envelope, it has
Mhm.
typesetted minimal information and my signature. It does not have any personal identifying information
Right.
to confirm my identity.
Mhm.
In person, you're going to see a physical ID. You're going to see something physical, or
Mhm.
by mail or online
Right.
with a voter registration form. You have to
Right.
use date of birth, social security, driver's license. Right?
Mhm.
There are personal identifying information.
Right.
That is the key.
Right.
Is being able to confirm identity of the voter.
Right. And let's pull that up again real quick, Steve.
You can't do that with the traditional ballot affidavit envelope, can
No,
you? You can't
can't.
confirm actual true
Right.
identity of
And
the
so
voter.
can you scroll up a little bit?
I think I cut it off right there.
Oh, okay.
Unfortunately.
And so this section of the elections procedures manual, right? And we talked about that. The Secretary of State drafts it, they submit it for public review, and then once it is accepted by the Secretary of State, the governor, and the Attorney General's office, and they all sign it, it becomes law. Right. Well, it
Right.
has the
It's then
effect
it
of
has
law.
the effect of law
Right.
and the penalties and punishment
There
of
we go.
law.
I said Attorney General. Yeah, what's her name again? Lincoln? Do you know the AG's name?
Yeah,
I
he
don't know.
says it's not
It's
true.
okay, Lincoln.
he
It's
says
okay,
it's
Lincoln.
he
And,
says it's not true.
and so, very clearly, this only allows in-person early voters affidavit envelopes to be scanned into the voter's public
Right.
record of registration. Right.
And that is the key point missing in the free
Correct.
enterprise case, right?
Yeah. And you can pull that down. And so this is the problem. What the counties are doing and what they started doing, I don't know if it was 2018 or 2020. I know Fontes was very actively doing it in 2020, is they're dumping all these signatures into the voter registration record. And I think a lot of the rationale behind that is because then they're hidden. Right. The
Right.
general public really can't simply
We can't
access
audit.
those. Nobody can audit those.
Right.
And that becomes the problem. Now, when we the people did the Senate audit of the 2020 election, I mean, how many signatures did you look at? Do you recall?
We looked at well over 50% of the 1.9 million.
Mm-hmm.
In the official audit. More have been reviewed since. So
Right.
there was probably about 3/4 of them that
Uh-huh.
actually got fully analyzed and
Mhm.
dispositioned. But all of the different various records were
Right.
reviewed at one point or another. And again, it was tedious and laborious. But the issue is we know
Mhm.
that at least 18 to 20% of those ballot affidavit envelopes
Uh-huh.
failed to meet standards.
Yeah.
That is a startling failure rate.
That's a
And
huge failure rate.
Definitely something
Right.
they don't want
Yeah.
exposed.
Well, and Adrian Fontes, yeah, and 10% were what, Steve?
Egregious.
Egregious. And by egregious, he means that they were really,
Blatant violations of
blind
law.
people could
Yeah.
look at these signatures and tell them.
When I
it's the
say
same.
egregious, I
Yeah.
mean grandma with thick cataracts from across the room, not being
Right.
able to find her glasses, can tell that that is not
Yeah.
the signature or even the same person.
Mhm.
That's what that 10% represents.
Right.
Well, and that doesn't even include the ones that we reviewed that had no signature at all,
Right.
right?
Right.
They were adapted. Now, one analogy that I use, and I don't remember if I use this in the Senate presentation or not, but I try and use it to make people understand what is happening here. If uh, I move out of my house
Mhm.
and let's say Brian moves in
Right.
behind me, and my ballot affidavit envelope arrives at Brian's home
Mhm.
for me,
Right.
and Brian decides he's going to vote that ballot
Mhm.
and sign my name.
Mhm.
If signature verification and curing fails, which
Right.
we have very distinct evidence that there's a very high probability it will fail,
Correct.
and that ballot affidavit is accepted. Now, my signature, performed by Brian,
Yep.
becomes my new signature.
Becomes your new identity.
It becomes my
Right.
new identity. And now, for perpetuity,
Right.
Brian can vote on my behalf
Right.
and nobody would know the difference. And it
Right.
would then consistently pass signature verification. It's like if I were a fraudster, a check fraudster, and I were to forge a check.
Mhm.
Say I got a hold of a checkbook from somebody and I forged a check and I went to the bank and the bank cashed that forged check,
Uh-huh.
but then took the signature on that forged check and made it my
Right.
new bank signature. Now that forger can access my account at any time,
Yep.
writing fraudulent
Yeah.
checks, accessing my bank account.
Mhm.
This is true identity theft that they are doing, and it's
Oh,
complete
100%.
violation of law.
Right. 100%. And this is, I mean, so there's a lot of talk right now about the voter registration databases and the quality of the voter registration data that we have, right?
Right.
And so by just slamming all of these signatures, and I think we're probably going to do a show in the future, aren't we, on signature verification and looking at what different signature verifiers were doing independently, right?
Absolutely.
And so you get some signature verifiers who just sit there and say approved, 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 approved as fast as they can. But if you get somebody that's conscientious, right, and let's say you have somebody that's got two different signatures in their voter registration record, right, because they added some new signature, and let's say those signatures are different, right, and this voter is comparing the two signatures, and they're like, wow. I mean, can I accept it or can't I accept it? Because apparently, this person changes the way they sign their name, pretty frequently, and that becomes a problem.
Right.
And
And they
so,
are instructed,
right,
sorry to interrupt you, but they are specifically instructed if the signature is close to
right,
or matches any one of the signatures
any
in the
one of
record,
the signatures,
then they should accept.
right, any one of them. And
Yeah.
so, let's say you have 5 signatures in your voter registration database, in your voter registration, your public record of registration, that they're using to verify your signature. If it matches any one of those, whether that's your actual signature or not, then they're going to approve that ballot, whether you voted it or not. And so, one of our last shows, we talked about the total number of ballots they actually mail to people, didn't we?
Absolutely.
And it would appear from the county's own data that in 2020, Adrian Fontes mailed twice as many mail-in ballots as there were
Registered voters
registered
on the
mail-in
AVL.
voters, right?
Yes.
And so with all of these ballots floating around out there, I mean, it would be very easy to somebody to sweep them all up, vote them, and just sign some name. And then they have their ringers sitting there doing signature verification, doing this, and then that signature goes into that voter's registration record, whether they voted the ballot or not. And so what we've been talking about tonight is it completely violates Arizona law because there's no law that actually gives the county recorder the power or authority to add those voter affidavit signatures to the voter registration record.
Because identity has
Right.
not been confirmed in
Right.
any of these cases, right?
And
So it's like
yeah.
adding a forged check into your bank account.
Uh-huh.
Identity has not been confirmed. And that
Right.
is the key And I think that's the element missing in the free enterprise case.
I
also.
think that's completely 100% the element missing in the free enterprise case. But the other problem is this, that we learned from the Lake v. Hobbs trial when Ray Valenzuela was testifying, right, that the EPM actually requires those early in-person ballot affidavit envelopes where they showed ID to be signature verified. And so if they're A, signature verified, and B, they're in person, they showed ID, then they get added. They can update the voters' public
Right.
record of registration, right?
But absent that, what did you call it? Not passive.
that
They have to
affirmative
take an
action.
affirmative action.
Right.
Without a voter's affirmative action, they don't have the right to alter a voter's record.
Right. But what did Ray Valenzuela testify to about the early in-person signature verification process? Right? Do they even do signature verification on those?
No, they
ballots?
do not.
They do not.
No.
Because they claim it's a violation of that voter's due process of law rights, which in
14th
fact,
Amendment violation, I
right,
think, is what they
which
consider it.
which in fact it is not, because to be a 14th Amendment violation of due process or equal protection of the law, they get supposedly an added benefit from being both signature verified and showing identification at the polls, right? They get an update of their signature in the voter registration record. So they're treated somewhat differently because they're treated somewhat differently. They've shown identification, right? And so that none of the signatures that Maricopa County has added to the voter registration records should have ever been added under Arizona law.
That's correct. Even to include, if
Mhm.
we were to say that if we were to concede that the Secretary of State had the authority
Right.
to allow for this in the EPM, the Election Procedures Manual,
Right.
even if we were to concede, which
If
we
we
do
were to
not,
concede that, which we're not.
but if we were to concede that, even the EPM
Yeah.
does not give a county the authority to do what they're doing.
That is 100% correct.
And that is key, and that is what's important for people to understand, is those ballot affidavit envelopes are a public record. They should not be part of a confidential voter record,
They should not be.
and they should be accessible
Right.
for organizations to audit.
Right. And the other question is, these are affidavits signed by voters. I
Right.
mean, does the county recorder have the legal authority to change the character of these records and thereby hide them from public view? And the answer to that question is no.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up. Can I digress a minute?
Yeah, digress away.
Okay, so one of the things that we noticed that I think is really important, and we can get into more detail about this in our next episodes when we talk more about the signature verification audit,
Mhm.
but the affidavit envelope, this is what they call it, ballot affidavit envelope. It is considered a legal affidavit. Is that correct, Brian?
Yeah, that's correct.
So the counties are actually modifying and altering those affidavit envelopes
Mhm.
during household swap, which is not anywhere allowed for in the EPM or in Arizona revised statute. So if we're in the same household and I
Right.
accidentally sign your ballot affidavit
Right.
envelope and you accidentally sign mine
Mhm.
and we throw them in the mail,
Right.
they identify same address, they re-signature verify them, and they change the name on the affidavit
Right.
to match the signer
Mhm.
instead of rejecting them.
Right.
Is it lawful, in your opinion, is it lawful for the county to alter those affidavits absent the ability to do so by law?
I don't believe so. I don't did it say anywhere on there that the government has the authority to redesignate that to somebody else?
No, as a
The
matter
answer
of
to that
fact,
question is no.
it says power of attorney
Yeah.
are not valid for voting purposes. Thank you for showing that, Steve. Here's the other interesting thing. They were accepting affidavit envelopes without signatures.
Yeah.
So see in big bold writing where it says ballot will not be counted without your signature.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting
Well,
the numerous violations of law that they
yeah, yeah.
continue to push.
Well, and there's legal process, right, whereby voters can cure their lack of signature on their ballot affidavit envelope, correct?
That is correct,
And
but there's a limited curing period.
right. And so,
So, oh yeah, if a voter was assisted by another person in marking or returning the ballot, complete the following. I declare under penalty and perjury. See, this has always been
mhm,
my concern with household swaps, Brian, is some people say, well, it's convenient and I
right,
understand it. This
right,
happens especially with husbands and wives.
right.
How many people are separated or divorced
Quite a few.
or moved out?
Right.
Does the county, when they do these
Uh-huh.
household swaps, they don't even contact the voter and
Right.
say, "Hey, is Susie your wife, and are you
Right.
guys still married? And
Right.
do you want Susie
Uh-huh.
signing your ballot affidavit envelope?" They
Right.
don't even contact the voters.
Yeah.
So, how many estranged household members?
Right.
People come and go. People
Mhm.
have cousins live with them. They
Right.
have girlfriends that
Yeah.
live with them, boyfriends.
Mhm.
So just because somebody is registered at the same household, does that
Doesn't
mean
mean
you
they're
want
still
them
there.
voting for you?
Right. Yeah, was it Eric? Um, you know what Eric is, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the one system. Eric, did you know it only had like 3 employees? Right? What was Eric supposed to do?
It was supposed to help clean up the voter rolls,
Right. And so
identify
yeah,
voters that should be canceled,
right,
changed, moved.
right. And one of the states that was a member of Eric, found like I think it was about a 55% error rate in Eric with the they had duplicates, and this is all part of the problem. And these are all the issues that lead to what we talked about in a previous show, right? One voter receiving multiple ballots. As many as what was the highest number of ballots some voters received? Was it 6 or 7?
It was 9. One
9.
voter received
Wow.
9. I believe it
Mhm.
was 9.
Right.
And then in another year, there was 6.
Right.
A voter received 6.
Well,
That is insane.
we say a voter received 6. We don't mean that the registered voter received 6.
Right. There
Right.
were 6 or 9 issued
Right.
ballots for one single voter,
Right.
right?
Right. Yeah.
Whether they actually went where they claimed they went, that's a
Uh-huh.
whole nother
Yeah.
conversation.
And of course, that's because, the US Postal Service, right? You know what happens to all these ballots that are deemed undeliverable?
No, but I don't think anybody else does either.
No. Yeah, not even the
Not
Postal
even the post
Service
office knows what
right?
happens to them.
Eric's mission is to help states improve the accuracy of America's voter rolls, right? Just like, adding signatures that don't match.
Right.
Does Eric fix that problem? Absolutely not.
No, not at all.
But what is the DOJ has requested access to Arizona's voter rolls, right?
That's correct.
What's Adrian Fontes said?
He gave him a big middle finger.
Yeah, he said,
Yeah.
"Well, oh no, we don't want you to see our voter registration database because, he knows it's shit, and they have all of these bad signatures that they've been adding to the voter
Yep.
registration, the public records of voters registration for a long time, and that's problematic, and it allows for it's a complete watering down of the voter registration database for purposes of mail-in voting, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
I've argued for a long time that allows for what we call voter identity theft. And changing the nature of voters by changing the nature of their signatures.
Well, and you know what's interesting?
Right.
It is identity theft in
Mhm.
in the aspect of voting.
Right.
It's definitely identity theft,
Mhm.
unquestionable. But you know what else it does? Interestingly enough, a lot of background check
Mhm.
software
Right.
and companies like Been Verified
Right.
and Truth Finders and
Uh-huh.
other background check software, especially commercially available background check software,
Mhm.
actually utilizes the voter registration record
Right.
in order to build your identity.
Right.
So if you think about that, if somebody is able to
Mhm.
alter your voter registration record, not only is it identity theft, but it
Right.
literally can have the effect of altering your identity.
Uh-huh.
We have found that some people that were registered to vote at households that didn't intend to vote at those households,
Hmm.
um, and never lived at that household,
Right.
if you run a background check on them, it will literally show that they've lived at that household, even though they never have,
Right.
because it pulls that data off the voter
Mhm.
registration record.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, commercial purposes can, aren't they supposed to be denied access to the voter registration records or the poll book or whatever they, want to refer them to them as?
At least in the state of
Right.
Arizona, you're supposed
Right.
to be denied
Yeah.
access. So it's
Interesting.
interesting that they're able
Yeah.
to do this, but they are.
Yeah.
Some of the background check software can
Mhm.
actually tell you their voter affiliation.
Right. Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what that Free Enterprise Club right now is before the Court of Appeals. I think they've already made arguments in which I think the Free Enterprise Club has stipulated that, yes, they add these ballot affidavit envelope signatures to the voters registration record. But I'm not sure if they actually argued that they're doing so unlawfully,
Right.
right? Because I think they may have stipulated that it's done pursuant to the Election Procedures Manual, which makes very clear it's got to be only those people who show ID to vote in person early.
Right. And early
And
in-person voting is very, very small in
right,
the state of Arizona.
and then
Very limited.
that are signature verified, and so
Yep.
oh,
So it's quite interesting
mhm,
how that case is going to come out.
right,
I believe that the argument we're making in order to receive the ballot affidavit envelopes from 2022 is a solid argument.
uh-huh,
I believe it has a lot of merit, and we're really excited about
right,
what that's going to bring, and
yeah,
we're hoping to know something in the
yeah,
next month or two
yeah. Who
would be
knows?
nice.
Who
So we'll
knows?
see.
But yeah, it's there are just a lot of ways to influence the outcome of an election, and we know that going leading into the Trump era, 2016, when everybody went into apoplectic shock, and the world became divided between pro-Trump and anti-Trump. uh, that our elections have become very heavily fortified by corporations, non-governmental organizations, and that we will not have truly free and fair elections until we restore the people to their rightful place in our election process, right?
Absolutely. And I'm very
Hmm.
grateful. I'm truly grateful to President Trump for being so bold and outspoken
Yeah.
about wanting to take some drastic measures to secure, at minimum, our federal elections.
Hmm.
I'm hopeful that if some of these actions take place, specifically minimizing and
Yeah.
eliminating no excuse mail-in ballots, that would
Uh-huh.
be phenomenal.
Yeah.
Um, that the states would then
Hmm.
follow suit with federal
Right.
law, because it would then create quite the
Uh-huh.
controversy for them to have to hold two separate types of elections,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So I'm grateful for that. I hope to see that come into fruition. As Brian pointed out, it all starts with chain of custody. And as Heather Honey and Verity Vote pointed out, chain of custody is practically non-existent, and it definitely has huge vulnerabilities. And then your fail-safe from there goes to signature verification, which we, the people, were able to prove is completely dysfunctional and also unreliable.
Hmm.
So without at least one of those two components functioning, you have a completely
Right.
unreliable election where you
Right.
can't trust the results and the outcome.
Yeah. And it all starts with a clean voter registration database. But then what's important is, who's running the recorder's office, because they're the ones responsible for mailing early ballots, right? And we know Maricopa County does so through Runbeck. And so the ultimate question is, why are so many duplicate ballots being sent to voters? Um, there should be very limited,
Right.
reasons for sending duplicate ballots to voters. And what are the controls on whether or not two ballots or more are received back? Which one wins? And so, there are a whole host of issues. But where do we go from here?
Right. Well,
Yeah.
and I think one of the biggest things is it documented anywhere
Uh-huh.
why those additional ballots were issued?
Right.
Because we've asked for this information, and I will
Right.
tell you, part of the public records laws, one of the things they tell you is we're not required to answer questions.
Right.
So these are questions that I think are
Mhm.
only going to get answered if enough public scrutiny is
Right.
placed upon them.
Right.
And these organizations, these governmental organizations,
Mhm.
are then forced to answer these questions. We're not going to get the answers from the contractors, so we
Right.
need to eliminate these contractors
Right.
out of our elections.
Mhm.
Doing so is dangerous.
Right.
Allowing these third party contractors, these non governmental agencies,
Mhm.
so intimately involved in our elections is absolutely dangerous. From
Yeah.
your cybersecurity and organizations like CISA, as we pointed out,
Right.
to their partnership with groups like CIS and States United,
Right.
all the way down to Runbeck, a third
Mhm.
party printing organization,
Right.
right?
Well, and
So
wasn't
it's absolutely
wasn't
dangerous and devastating.
Wasn't Runbeck's ownership fairly anti-Trump in the 2020 election? Who knows? I
Yeah.
mean, but
How would we know, right?
yeah. And so I think next week we're going to talk a little bit about the law, right?
Yes.
And a little bit more about the law, and how, organizations and groups have tried to shape the law to remove conservative voices from election challenges and to basically intimidate younger lawyers away from representing conservative interests, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what else
Let's
we
do
got?
it. I think that's it.
That it?
I think that's a good show.
Well, cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Good seeing you again. By
Yeah.
God. You
Absolutely.
got anything to add back there, Steve?
It just amazes me how our former elections department, Adrian Fontes, uh, I'm just amazed how they get away with not following the law or changing the law. They use semantics and the courts just eat it up. They just buy it, they go along with it. They automatically give them the benefit of the doubt for anything that comes before them, even though it runs contrary to the actual letter of the law. Like, where else in contractual law is it okay to change documents, to add or take away from something without the signer's consent or knowledge?
Well,
Like, it just all of this is amazing to me.
I think, Steve, the reason they get away with it in elections is because we've been sold this lie that we don't want voters to be disenfranchised, that every attempt to clean up the mess that we're dealing with in our elections is an attempt to keep people from voting. And the reality is it's absolutely not allowed anywhere else because nobody would stand for a government agency altering their deeds and their property and their home, right?
Right.
So the only way we're going to change it is we, the people,
Mhm.
meaning all of you out there, all of the citizens, we have to decide enough is enough and we have to keep fighting and stand up for this. And we
Mhm.
have to fight back, whether it be in a court of
Right.
law or in the court of public opinion, because
Mhm.
we have to make it unacceptable.
Right.
Because you're right, it's ridiculously hypocritical and it's insane that it is accepted when it isn't anywhere else. But that is because we're not,
Mhm.
as a society, holding them accountable.
Well, and Steve, you also, have to, give a little bit of deference because we know now that Brennan fabricated the intelligence on Russia, right? Completely
Yep.
made it up. And then his intelligence operatives like Susan Spalding and Elizabeth Roscoff Parker, converted that fabricated intelligence, including the Steele dossier, right? It was all fabricated. 100%. The Russian intelligence was fabricated 180 degrees polar opposite of what it actually said, right? And they fabricated it, and then these national security operatives converted that into scholarly journals that they were pushing down the throat of the ABA, pushing down the throat of the state bar associations, and we know through their non-governmental organizations, spook partners, pushing it down the throats of our courts for years, all the way to top to bottom. Watch out. The Russians are going to make these claims, are going to make these arguments. And so, if you're a court and you're sitting there and you've already, been told, we got all this Russian disinformation going on. They're going to try to destabilize our democracy by attacking our elections. And what are you to think? And that was part of the purpose of fabricating this entire Russian intelligence narrative, was to do just that. Right?
I'm so glad that's finally unraveling,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, it's beyond unraveling.
Oh, yeah.
People need to actually go
To prison?
before a court, a jury. I'm sorry. They need
Yeah.
to go before a jury of their peers
Mhm.
to answer for some of these things.
Right. I agree.
And when you
100%.
say people, we're talking people of the highest level.
Right.
Oh,
mean,
absolutely.
Yeah.
These are people that were put in a position of power, and they abused that position of power, and they
100%.
weaponized our government against us.
Knowingly.
Yeah. Knowingly, intentionally, willfully.
Absolutely. And then we, the people, need to start holding our elected officials accountable for their actions, for what they do in office. And not just them, but the media too. I wholeheartedly 100% support the First Amendment. People's the right to free speech, to thoughts, ideas, to participating in the open marketplace of ideas.
Right.
We need to protect that at all costs. But when a media intentionally lies,
Right.
right?
Well, you got to look at.
They're not
Yeah.
breaking the law constitutionally.
Right.
But what they are is they're breaking the trust, the unwritten contract with the public.
Yeah.
And the public can vote with their voice, with their
Yeah.
dollars.
Over
Right,
there
they
They
need
can
to
stop.
Yeah.
No.
I
Yeah.
think they're kind of doing that, right? Like, isn't MSNBC going bankrupt, right? And this is what you're talking about, right, Steve? Is we have to stop supporting the lying media.
Right.
We have to stop electing the
Mhm.
bad politicians, and we got to
Right.
get these bureaucrats and these non-governmental organizations out of
Right.
our government.
100%.
That's a huge.
I saw this
struggle.
cute meme on the way in today, and it said, Jimmy Kimmel is being given his job back so that he can be fired for having crappy ratings. And it's like, he should have been fired years ago. If you look at his ratings,
Yeah.
my God,
Yeah.
who watches him? Not very many people.
No.
But the reason he's in the position he's in is I think, to continue to radicalize the far left, and that's why we're seeing a lot of what we're seeing today. So when you guys leave here tonight, stay safe, be careful,
Turn your televisions off.
Yeah.
Stop watching the news.
go camping.
Educate yourself. Yeah. Go
Right.
camping.
Yeah.
Get closer to your creator. Get closer to
Right.
God. Use
Mhm.
good discernment.
Yeah.
Start thinking for yourself. Stop paying mainstream media,
Right.
and we're going to be better off that way. 'Cause
Yeah.
We've
Stop
got
giving your hard-earned money
And
to corporations and media monsters that are using your money to destroy you and our country.
yeah.
That's what we need to do.
Yeah.
And get out of your damn house, meet your neighbors, talk to people,
Right.
socialize. Don't just turn your TV off. Maybe put
Right.
your phone down for a few minutes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And hold your elected accountable. And that's what
Yeah.
We the People AZ Alliance is here for. We the People USA Alliance is here for. Our core mission at WTP USAA is to hold our government accountable for the things that they do. And we
Right.
cannot do it without you. So share the information with those that are uninformed. Make sure that they understand what's going on. Look at the evidence. Educate yourselves. Show up at meetings. Show up at town halls. Have your voices be heard, because
Yeah.
the only way we will ever accomplish freedom
Mhm.
and true sense of we, the people being empowered in this government, is if we all stand together and
Right.
hold them accountable, right?
Yeah. Well, you have any final words, Lincoln? He wants to play ball.
Come on,
He's-
Lincoln.
He's ready to play ball.
Well, with that being said,
Yeah.
I think we're out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Peace.